This modern ladder-style bookcase is my first proper commission from someone who I've never met before. However, it came with a twist. My client wanted to come and pick it up in 3 days' time. Given that the timber needed to sit for a day after milling, and I needed a day to apply finish and let it dry, this left me with 1 day for construction. My client showed me the design that they wanted and specified the heights of the shelves. Since the upright sits at an angle, I quickly drew it in SketchUp to calculate the angle of the sides and the depth of each shelf, since they each needed to sit proud of the upright by the same amount. In the end, it worked out that 2 boards needed material added to their width, and 2 needed it removing. The material removed from the upper shelves formed the material added to the lower shelves. This process was all done on day 1, so that the glue could dry overnight. The lowest shelf needed a little extra depth, but thankfully I had a scrap piece big enough. Each of the boards are 1 inch thick and 48 inches long. Between the floor and the second shelf is a third leg, which is hollow at the back to hide wires, and supports the TV which sits on the second shelf. This is necessary due to the big cantilever in the lower shelves. I made this in one piece with a simple mitre join on the corners. I used a plywood former the width of the inside edge of the front piece. This gave me something to clamp against while gluing. The next day, when the glue had dried, I could cut the shelves to their final length and width. The bottom shelf was too large to cross-cut at the table saw, so I used the router against the straight edge to square off both ends. I did this in multiple passes to reduce wear on the bit. To cut the angle on the bottom of the side supports, I first calculated it in SketchUp, then used an adjustable set square to adjust the mitre gauge on my table saw. Since the workpiece is so long, I clamped it to the mitre gauge for safety. Without adjusting the angle of the mitre gauge, I marked out the start and stop points for the dado that holds the first shelf. These distances were calculated in SketchUp. I then adjusted the height of the blade and removed the material in several passes. I left it undersized so I could fine-tune the fit with a chisel. With the shelf seated in the dado, I used a marking knife to transfer the location of the other half of the half-lap joint. This makes the shelves much stronger than a simple dado. With the marking gauge set to the correct depth, I scribed a line on both sides of the shelf. This part is very similar to cutting pins on a dovetail. I used a pull saw to cut the vertical faces, then removed the majority of the waste with a fret saw. I pared back my knife line with a chisel for a good fit. Since the shelves are so big, I had to do a lot of the work on the floor. When working on the floor with chisels, I'm careful to place a piece of scrap wood underneath to protect my chisels from the concrete. The joint is made in such a way that the upright sits proud of the shelf by 1/16 of an inch, which in my opinion looks better than being flush. Being such a big glue up, I didn't have time to film it, but here is how it looked the morning after, on day 3, which is the final day. With the shelf location finalised, I can cut the third leg into 2 sections, one between the floor and shelf 1, and one between shelves 1 and 2. This gives grain continuity across the 2 pieces. I cut the sides narrower on the bottom section so that there is clearance between the leg and the wall for skirting. I then cut a number of blocks to screw into the leg from behind and connect it to the shelves. I set a depth stop on my drill press to counterbore the screw holes, then I drilled a clearance hole in the junction block. I tapped the screw with a hammer to transfer the hole location, then drilled a pilot hole in the leg section using a depth stop to prevent the hole from going the whole way through. I used the same process to mark the hole location of the shelves. Here is how it looks all put together. You can see how the leg looks like a single part. I used the router and a straight edge to make a notch in the back of the first and second shelves, so that the wires can pass through. Finally, I can apply the finish. This was lunchtime of day 3, 24 hours before my client picked up the bookcase. I'm using Osmo Polyex for the finish. Apologies for the delay in this video. I'm now at uni, so videos may be few and far between, but this channel is definitely not dead.